Good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure to see you. I'm Lauren McKenna, Chancellor of the Philadelphia Bar Association, and I welcome you to our program this afternoon. We're here at the wonderful Suzanne Roberts Theater in what is our first large event in over 18 months. It's so wonderful to see so many familiar faces and to be able to offer other members an opportunity to participate in our program virtually. Our summer program has traditionally been focused on the importance of promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion within the Philadelphia legal community. These issues have long been a focus and of great importance to our organization. Diversity, equity, and inclusion has been a fundamental element of our association's mission. As early as 1970, then Chancellor Robert Landis formed a commission to investigate racial bias in Pennsylvania's bar admissions process. The commission's landmark report found that while 98% of white applicants passed the exam, only 70% of Black applicants passed. And out of over 7,000 attorneys in Pennsylvania at that time, only 130 were Black. Only one large law firm at the time had a Black partner, and no large law firm had more than 3 Black associates. The committee's findings from 1970 gained national attention and led not only to successful negotiations for changes in how the bar exam was administered in Pennsylvania, but also in other states who were using the report to make similar changes. Within 2 years, 82 Black people were admitted to the Pennsylvania bar, nearly equaling the number who had been admitted between 1955 and 1970. In 1993, under then Chancellor Andre Dennis, the association developed a statement of goals of Philadelphia law firm and legal departments for increasing minority representation and retention. Those goals and commitments that were made to serve them were subscribed to by over 70 law firms and corporations in Philadelphia. Sitting here today, over 25 years later, the city has grown, the practice of law has changed, but we still remain committed, and we are still working on the issues that were articulated in that report. I suggest that it's time to reevaluate, update, and renew those commitments. I've looked at the list of corporations and law firms who signed on. Some don't exist anymore. Many have grown substantially. And I would suggest that all of them have the ability to make an important impact on the continued work towards diversity in our profession. And I'm pleased to announce that that's something I plan to undertake during the balance of my term as Chancellor this year. In keeping with this focus, we have also been privileged to present the Justice Sonia Sotomayor Award at our summer quarterly program. And traditionally, we have offered a lecture in memory and to support the mission of Judge A. Leon Higginbotham. But this year is unlike any year that we've had in the association's 100+ year history. It has required us to think about things differently to meet our members' needs. So as a result, the look of our summer quarterly has changed a bit. This year, I'm pleased to welcome Marcel Pratt, Philadelphia Managing Partner of Ballard Spahr, who will share more about Judge Higginbotham's life and legacy, followed by a panel focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion from the view of General Counsel's office. We are proud and honored to have present with us today 3 executives from major companies joining us in that discussion. Stephanie Lewis, General Counsel of IKEA North America, Gail Littleton, Executive Vice President and General Counsel at Exelon Corporation, and Rudy Rivera, Chief International Counsel at Fidelity National Financial. We will also have the honor to present this year's Justice Sonia Sotomayor Award to Brenda Marrero, Executive Director of the Public Interest Law Center. I hope that this program today, while different from what we've done traditionally as an association, will show the importance of establishing connections across different organizations and sectors as we work towards full and equitable participation in the legal profession and equal access to justice for all. I would like to give special thanks to the members of our Sonia Sotomayor Election Committee and its chair, Al Dandridge. Thank you, Al, for leading the effort with respect to this election this year. And I would also like to thank our corporate in-house counsel committee, comprised of Romy Diaz, Frank LaFontaine, and David Kahn, who worked with me since February months in developing the thoughts behind a program like this. We really appreciate your assistance in putting together this summer's Higginbotham panel. Finally, I'd like to recognize our 2021 Higginbotham Fellow. As many of you know, each year, the Public Interest section funds a summer internship at one of the city's legal services agency. This year's Higginbotham Fellow is Lena Diker, who I had the privilege to meet a little bit earlier today, and I welcome you here, Lena. This summer, Lena is interning at the Support Center of Child Advocates and doing terrific research on critical issues supporting minority children and families in the child welfare system. Our quarterly today is just one of the many exciting activities taking place within our association. This year has presented challenges in terms of how we communicate and how we engage with our members. But we've stayed true to our effort to stay engaged with you, to be part of your practice, and to support the association and the profession in a time of great difficulty for many in the legal profession. I hope that you'll join me this fall for our Bench Bar Conference. We'll have a wonderful event on September 30th, which will be an outdoor event. I was at the outdoor venue yesterday. It was really superb, at which time we will recognize our immediate past chancellor, Judge Mike Snyder, who I see in the audience, Mike, and we will also present this year's Justice Brennan's Distinguished Jurist Award, followed by a day of virtual programming on October 1. None of this is possible without the efforts of the Bar Association staff and the leaderships that we have been so fortunate to have this year in terms of our committees and sections. And I thank all of you who are attending today, either in person or virtually, for your continued commitment to our profession and this association. Thank you for joining me for today's program. It is my privilege and honor to serve as your chancellor. And I thank you for continuing to support the community that is this association. We would not be who we are and would not be the voice we have and would not be able to support the issues that we so value, that are near and dear to our hearts as an organization with respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion without you. Now I'm pleased to introduce Al Dandridge, former chancellor and this year's chair of the Justice Sonia Sotomayor Award Committee. Al? Thank you, Al.
Thank you, Lauren. I love this award. One of the reasons why I love it so much is that it's been presented to so many people that have done so much for diversity, equity, and inclusion in the Philadelphia area. It's a special award named after a special person and is only given to special people. This year, Brenda will get this award, and it's wonderful to have her be part of this wonderful community of people who've gotten it. From Temple University Law School to Deputy Director for Operations at Community Legal Services, to Executive Director of the Public Interest Law Center. Clearly, Brenda has DEI in her DNA. I am pleased to present the 2021 Justice Sonia Sotomayor Award to Brenda Marrero. Brenda, please.
Thank you so much. I needed to put it down because it's a beautiful award. I don't want to break it. I am beyond humbled and so grateful to be standing here in front of all of you accepting this award. In my wildest dreams, I could not have imagined that one day I would be the recipient of an award named after the first Latina US Supreme Court Justice. Thank you for giving me this honor, for acknowledging me in such a deeply meaningful way, and for embracing me with open arms in this legal community. I will treasure this moment. A million gracias to the Hispanic Bar Association of Pennsylvania for nominating me for this award. I want to give a special huge thanks to JP Faunus, the president of the HBA, and the duo who put together the nomination packet, Fernando Rivera and Gustavo Cardona. Thank you for having faith in me and my accomplishments and for holding me up in this way. The HBA was one of the first organizations I joined as a law student in my 1L year at Temple Law. Thank you for 23 years of leadership, acceptance, friendship, and belonging. And of course, thank you to the Philadelphia Bar Association, Al Dandridge, and the Sotomayor Nominations Committee. I was lucky enough to be there when Justice Sotomayor received the inaugural award. That memory is a highlight of my career, and I did not think that could be topped, but today you have topped it. Thank you to the association for honoring me in this way. Thank you for creating this award and annually acknowledging Justice Sotomayor's spirit, values, and accomplishments with each honorable recipient. And thank you for all the work I know you are doing in advancing the principles and values of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in our legal profession. I am truly honored to be part of this work that I hold so dear. I would be remiss not to acknowledge my daily support system, mi familia, whose love and apoyo has gotten me to where I am today. My mom and sisters are some of the strongest women that I know, and I am blessed to have close friends who have given me advice, wisdom, and much needed laughter in some of my most trying times. My husband, Ron, is my biggest cheerleader, and not far behind are my two boys, Anthony and Andrew. Anthony, it means the world to me that you are here today watching me get this award. And Andrew, I know you're watching at home, buddy. Everything I do and the sacrifices I make, all of it are for a larger purpose. Each day, whether you know it or not, you and Andrew inspire me in every way. Just know that the two of you are the reason I strive to be my best in every role I take on in life, and why I have worked so hard to advance myself in my career, because I want to do my part to leave this world in a little bit of a better place for you both. I love you boys more than I'll ever be able to express. This award honors an individual who has demonstrated a strong commitment to promoting full and equal participation and inclusion in the legal profession. In writing this speech, I reflected a lot on that statement. I thought, what can I say to a room full of the best and brightest legal minds in our Philadelphia community that can have an impact? What can be helpful in continuing to advance and promote that full and equal participation and inclusion in our legal profession? So I went to Justice Sotomayor's memoir, My Beloved World, for wisdom and inspiration. In the preface to her memoir, Justice Sotomayor shared why she embarked on this monumental task of writing about her personal story. She wrote that since her appointment to the US Supreme Court, she had spoken to a wide variety of groups in different settings, and she would get all sorts of questions. Justice Sotomayor said in her memoir, quote, "Underlying all these questions was a sense that my life's story touches people because it resonates with their own circumstances. The challenges I have faced, among them material poverty, chronic illness, and being raised by a single mother, are not uncommon, but neither have they kept me from uncommon achievements. For many, it is a source of hope to see someone realize her dreams while bearing such burdens," end quote. She goes on to ask a series of questions. How has adversity spurred her on instead of knocking her down? And asking, what are the sources of her own hope and optimism? She wrote, quote, "Most essentially, my purpose in writing is to make my hopeful example accessible. People who live in difficult circumstances need to know that happy endings are possible," end quote. And she is so right. When I embarked on learning about and advancing DEI work in legal services, it was scary and at times overwhelming. And many times it required a certain level of vulnerability. I found I was most vulnerable when I shared my own personal story, my own challenges, my struggles, but also my successes. This work has shown me that by sharing my personal story with young people, law students, staff members looking to me for leadership, groups of lawyers who are committed to doing their part to advance DEI in their firms or organizations, promotes the exact type of accessibility to something we often overlook in our conversations about DEI, hope. Hope that by embracing our differences, celebrating diversity with authenticity, creating inclusive environments where people like me and my fellow Latina lawyers feel like they belong, we will realize the promise of equity in our legal profession. Some of you in the audience have heard me talk about my journey in the past, my non-linear path to public interest lawyering, but also my inner struggles to find a sense of belonging and how much I have had to fight off my insecurities to believe that I do belong at the table where decisions are made. And what I ask of you all today in the spirit of this award and Justice Sotomayor's example is to share your personal story and make that hopeful example accessible to those who need it most. Imagine the optimism you could spur in others. Find that opportunity to talk to a young person who is not sure if they can make it to law school because they question whether they have the smarts or the resources to get there. Find that law student who is navigating personal or academic challenges and talk to them about what you went through, how you got through it, who you leaned on, and what you learned every time you failed. Find that young lawyer who is so unsure of themselves because they are still struggling to find their voice and talk to them about how you found your voice. Every time we share our story, we advance the principles of diversity and inclusion in this profession, and we show others that they belong too. We all need that hope, those examples of success. We need mentors and sponsors, people who support us and share with us how their adversity spurred them on instead of knocking them down. Each time we do that, we honor Justice Sotomayor's resilience of spirit, her values, and her purpose for sharing herself with us in such a poignant way in her memoir. Justice Sotomayor is the first Latina to serve on the United States Supreme Court. Her firsts inspire me. And so I am honored to be the new executive director of the Public Interest Law Center and the first Latina to lead the organization. And what a journey to get here. My path was a true example of resilience, a fiery will to succeed and beat the odds. I am so proud to be representing Latina lawyers in executive leadership, and I do not and will not take that privilege for granted. I value the partnerships our organization has. Together with so many of you, the Law Center furthers its mission with each step every day. And I promise you that every opportunity I have to use my role and my visibility to make my hopeful example accessible, I am going to make the time to do it. When the Law Center announced my appointment as the new executive director, some colleagues from Rutgers Law, Jill Friedman and Pam Ritzok-Wolf, sent me the most beautiful print of Justice Sotomayor. When I opened that gift, I cried happy tears. What a beautiful message from the universe that I find myself here with you all today, being honored in her name. On that print is a beautiful quote. And when I was reading the preface to Justice Sotomayor's memoir, I was happy to come across it again. And reading it in full context resonated with me even more. Justice Sotomayor wrote, "Experience has taught me that you cannot value dreams according to the odds of their coming true. Their real value is in stirring within us the will to aspire. That will, wherever it finally leads, does at least move you forward. And after a time, you may recognize that the proper measure of success is not how much you've closed the distance to some far off goal, but the quality of what you've done today. I hope today I have done something that speaks to that quality. Thank you for this cherished honor."
Brenda, congratulations. And I'm so pleased that your family could be with you here to celebrate today. It's very meaningful for us as well. And we're really proud of you. I'd now like to take the opportunity to introduce our moderator for today's program, Marcel Pratt. For those of you who know Marcel, he is a force. He is currently a managing partner of the Philadelphia office of Ballard Spahr. Prior to that, he was appointed at age 33 in 2018 as the Philadelphia Law Department City Solicitor. He was the youngest person ever to hold the city's top legal post. And in that role, he oversaw an operation of over 330 lawyers and staff. Marcel, I appreciate you being here today to guide our discussion, to talk about the words of Judge Higginbotham, and to focus on the issues that matter to all of us regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It is good to see all of you in person after so many months apart. And to those of you watching virtually, it is good to be seen. Chancellor McKenna, thank you for that kind introduction and your leadership of our association. And I also want to congratulate Brenda Marrero on her well-deserved receipt of the Sotomayor Award. And also want to recognize former Chancellor Dandridge for his remarks and contributions to our profession. And a special thank you to Romy Diaz for helping us plan our panel tonight. One of the greatest traditions that our Bar Association has is honoring the legacy of Judge Leon Higginbotham. He holds a very special place in our legal community. He, of course, had impeccable credentials. He demonstrated remarkable brilliance as a federal district court judge and on the Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. He was one of the brightest legal scholars in the country on issues of race and legal process, having authored countless journal articles and 2 noteworthy books on race and the law. But just as much as we've admired the judge for his credentials, he was also admired and still is for his character. Perhaps one of the judge's greatest attributes was his courage to remain outspoken against all forms of injustice. Some of us know about the infamous motion to recuse Judge Higginbotham, the one that argued that because he was an outspoken Black judge who opposed racial inequality off the bench, that he should recuse himself from a discrimination case involving Black plaintiffs. Those accusations were, of course, unsuccessful, but permitted the judge to prove that vocal opposition to inequality and legal objectivity are not mutually exclusive. And it was because of his impartiality, fairness, and respect for precedent that he would be appointed to the Third Circuit. Our Bar Association also reflects on the judge's legacy because it reminds us of the power that we have as lawyers to respond to injustice. He chose the law as his career precisely because of an injustice. As a college student, he challenged his university on why Black students were forced to sleep in the unheated attic of a private home instead of the college dorms. The president of his university told him that the law did not require the school to allow Black students to sleep in the college dorms. Judge Higginbotham would later reflect on that incident. Quote, "I knew then I had been touched in a way I had never been touched before, and that one day I would have to return to the most disturbing element in this incident, how a legal system that proclaims equal justice for all could simultaneously deny even a semblance of dignity to a 16-year-old boy who committed no wrong," end quote. The story reminds us of the impact that one lawyer can have by responding to injustice, and also perhaps why some of us became lawyers in the first place. The judge's legacy also serves as a model for what outspoken courage looks like outside of the courtroom. He was known to refuse any award or honor that did not reflect racial, religious, or gender equality. He once rejected an invitation to judge a law school moot court competition because they had no Black faculty and had not hired any for quite some time. And as the first Black person to serve on Yale's board of directors, he was a vigorous advocate for the admission of women into Yale. He made arguments to the board for why gender diversity at the institution would vastly improve its quality, and how, ironically, the contributions of women would benefit those who perpetuated gender discrimination in the first place. And as a member of an American delegation to South Africa, he once reminded the National Party in South Africa, which had reiterated their commitment to apartheid, how perpetrators of oppression are judged in the corridors of history. We currently live in times that require outspokenness and courage, just as Judge Higginbotham demonstrated. In the summer of 2020, the murder of George Floyd ignited a reckoning with racial injustices that have existed for far too long, because our society has not been outspoken or courageous enough. As Dr. King said over 50 years ago, quote, "Our nation's summers of riots are caused by our nation's winters of delay." In response to the events of last year, corporate America, including many law firms, did speak out and made public commitments to promote racial equity internally and externally. And much progress has been made, but we should also reflect on the work that still is left to be done, which is a lot. Our Bar Association usually honors the legacy of Judge Higginbotham with a lecture, as the Chancellor said. But because of these unprecedented times, the Bar decided to honor the judge's legacy in a different manner, but one that is just as meaningful. We will engage in a discussion today about true commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion from the viewpoint of the General Counsel seat, one of the most powerful roles in the legal profession. Our panelists are extremely accomplished lawyers and business leaders, and were identified to participate in this discussion because of their track records and commitment to equality. So I'm going to ask them to join me on stage. We have Gail Littleton, who is the General Counsel of Exelon Corporation. We have Stephanie Stevie Williams, who is the General Counsel and Head of Legal Operations for IKEA North America, and Rudy Rivera, who is the Chief International Counsel for Fidelity National Financial. Let's give our panelists a round of applause. So I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. Everyone is excited to hear from you. And I know that this is a topic that is very passionate to all of you, having spoken with you. To start this off, if you could introduce yourselves and share a little bit about why diversity, equity, and inclusion is important to you personally. And I will start with Gail.
Well, thank you, Marcel. So hello, everyone. I'm Gail Littleton. I am the General Counsel at Exelon. I am thrilled to be here with you today. I want to give a shout out to our PICO lawyers and our Exelon lawyers who are with us here today and on video. So thank them for coming and supporting today. So, diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that has been a personal commitment for me throughout my entire professional career. I like to work as part of a team. I think when we work as part of a team, we make better decisions, we work collaboratively. And in order to do that well, we need to have diverse perspectives. I was at a law firm before joining Exelon, where I headed the Women Partners Group. And as part of that, having been a young lawyer, grew up at the U.S. Attorney's Office and then at a law firm, you could really see the places where there were opportunities to address some of the issues around diversity, equity, and inclusion to make things better for all lawyers. But in particular, my focus was on how we could make things better for women lawyers. And what I realized was really just by taking some proactive steps and measures to try to improve things, you can make a huge difference. And that allows us, again, collectively to make better decisions. So that's really why it's personal to me. And I'm thrilled to be at Exelon to be able to continue that legacy.
Thank you, Gail. And Rudy, the same question for you.
It's an interesting question. It's a question that's dear and near to my heart because I'm a product of affirmative action. I'm a product of the diversity and inclusion. And so when you're the beneficiary, you look at it from a different point of view. When I was growing up, affirmative action was it was called at the time, allowed you a seat, well, a place at the door to get in. But then you had to really work hard and sometimes work above to make sure you kept your seat. What I've learned throughout my life is that people who have different backgrounds, different ways to think can add so much more to a company. And what often people don't talk about is just how profitable diversity and inclusion can be. Stop and think about it. There's a report by the McKinsey Corporation that says companies that are diverse are 19% more profitable, are more likely to gain a 70% more market share. Because you have people who understand how your market thinks. And that's what diversity and inclusion is about, is getting those people with those ideas. And what I've learned in my experience is that people will always rise to the occasion. They always rise, given the chance and given the mentorship. And that's why it's near and dear to me.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about mentorship tonight. Stevie, same question for you. Why is diversity, equity, and inclusion important to you?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. And I'm so humbled by the opportunity to be here. ED&I, as we say at IKEA, is important, and it was instilled in me as a young girl. You know, my father was a human resource executive, and we moved a lot throughout the country. We lived in predominantly white suburbs, but he always made sure that we knew who we were and what we stood for. I'm a product of an HBCU. I went to Hampton University. And at age 10, I decided I wanted to be a lawyer because I figured that that was the profession that would affect the most change. So I went on to work and then to law school. And throughout my career, I've always taken this bold and audacious position on what's fair. I don't need pity, I need fairness. And at IKEA, it proved a climate where we could have these discussions, but there was a recognized aspect of what the culture was at IKEA, that there was work to do. And we could do a lot externally, we could do a lot in the communities, but when I became general counsel only in December of 2020, I told our CEO, we have a lot of work to do in our own house, and let's start there. And one of the biggest decisions that I challenged him on was to elevate the position from reporting to someone who reported to someone who reported to the head of HR to report directly to him. And that's what we've done, what we decided to do at IKEA. And that's how I will use both my legal background and now my passion for diversity that's been honed over these years to make change and move the needle. It's enough talk. It's time to move the needle. Thank you.
Thank you, Stevie. And I just want to say for all of the panelists, we need more leaders like you who are passionate and committed. And we have talked a little bit about the benefits of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And oftentimes we hear people talk about, making the case for it. I think it's pretty obvious and straightforward, but I do want to ask you, what are the benefits of being committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion? And what positive changes have you seen from implementing a program? And with that question, I'll start with Rudy.
Interestingly, I'm on the board of the Association of Corporate Counsel, which is the largest in-house counsel organization probably in the world, with offices in London, Singapore, chapters in Australia. If you go into the offices in DC, it's like a mini United Nations. I would say probably 40% of the people who work, many are lawyers, many are not, speak another language. Some maybe speak 2 or 3 languages. What these people brought to them was a perspective that allowed us to grow into 4,500 members, actually more than that, throughout the world. It's because people with those mindset has allowed us to expand. People often think from an American point of view, they'll say, well, that's how we do it. We assume everybody else does it. And we have to respect other cultures. We have to respect what they need and what we need and somehow harmonize it. Interestingly, about 10 years ago, I walked into a Home Depot, and I don't know how long Home Depot had been doing this, but I saw the signs in Spanish. And I thought to myself, what a great idea. There's a huge construction contingency in St. Louis where I was living at the time, roofers who spoke no English but work construction jobs. They have to know where the stuff is on the aisles. And just that simple change has to come from somebody who had the idea, well, how are we going to service these customers? And that's what I think is important. That's the benefit to it. Some people look at it as a charity thing. It's not. It's good for the bottom line.
Absolutely, and it's the right thing to do. Stevie, same question for you. What are the benefits of diversity, equity, and inclusion?
The data speaks for itself, and we can talk about that a lot, but we know where that is. I think from an inclusive perspective, from a cultural, internal perspective, it's important to be able to recruit for diversity of thought and ideas and development. But then how do we marry that with inclusion? Because you're not going to retain those talented people if they don't feel included or they don't see someone who looks like them. So the benefits speak for themselves, from a profit perspective, from a bottom line perspective, but for a company to hone and create an environment where others can grow and be developed and even move on, like so many in majority environments have done, it's an obligation. And that's how I see it, as not just a business imperative, which is obvious, but an obligation. When I think about IKEA and I think about how long the brand has been around, it's iconic, people understand, they know what it is. How great would it be if our underrepresented groups, our Black and Hispanic and Asian coworkers, influenced our range? Just think about the expansion in the demographic of customers. If the range were to incorporate things that were not just Scandinavian and modern, but had a touch of culturalism infused in it. So from a workforce perspective, there are benefits, but then from a business development perspective, there are benefits. How about influencing AI and our digital team and how what interact with customers on buying online, and just that growing exponentially. But it starts with an inclusive mindset. And it starts with the education about how unconscious bias, good, bad, or indifferent, is infiltrated in every one of us. But from a business perspective, how do we turn that around and make it something of value, not only for customers, but coworkers that can influence how the organization looks at these things?
And Gail, same question for you.
Yeah, and just to build on what my fellow panelists have said, I mean, their research is quite clear that there are business benefits and that, diverse teams make better decisions. They're more innovative. So there's clearly a bottom line reason to do it. But setting aside that, one of the things that we focus a lot on at Exelon is the culture, and we live our values, and our values are very much focused on DE&I. And what I have noticed, I think most pronounced, in addition to what's already been said, is the impact of diversity on the culture, the environment in which we work. We live in a time where people are intensely polarized. So for some reason, we have forgotten how to talk to each other about difficult issues. We have an inability to talk to each other about difficult issues with respect. And we have an inability to hear each other when we think differently. And what I have noticed the most about diversity efforts, both prior to coming to Exelon and in particular at Exelon, is that by having a focus on diversity, we have an environment where people can feel free to talk to one another. We in our department do something called the Diversity Dialogues, which is a series of meetings with 10 to 12 people and a moderator in a judgment-free zone to talk about a very difficult issue. And where we have diverse groups, everyone's voice is added to that conversation. And all of a sudden, when you have a diverse group of people coming together to talk about difficult issues, with no judgment, with an assumption that we're all acting with good intent, all of a sudden, very difficult issues can be discussed in ways that you would never anticipate. And it allows and fosters an environment where people feel comfortable. And when people feel comfortable, they can be their best selves as lawyers, and they can do the best work for the company. So it's not just about all the things that we hear about in terms of profitability, innovation, and the like. It's also about creating an environment where people feel comfortable, where they actually can be their best selves as employees.
So we've talked about the benefits of diversity, why it's important, why it's the right thing to do. But there was this reckoning last year that as a society, we have not done enough. And in the wake of that, corporate America made a lot of commitments about doing better, promoting racial equality. But a lot of folks are skeptical. And so the question for you is, how have your organizations made commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion that are both sustainable and authentic? And with that question, I will start with Stevie.
So that's a good question. And I know we read and we saw a lot of organizations sort of step up to the plate after the murder of George Floyd last summer. At IKEA, we did the same, and we poured money into investing in Black business initiatives, in-kind donations to organizations, and there was a laundry list. But as I said in my previous answer, it caused us to look internally and start to get our house in order. So one of the first things that I did when I came into the role, and I had the opportunity to hire, basically double the department, was intentionally picking the best of what I saw as diverse candidates. And if the best of the best was a white male, so be it. But I built a diverse team because I wanted to make sure that I myself did something that I was going to be asking, right? So after building a diverse team, not only could I hold other functions internally accountable, I could hold suppliers, vendors accountable as well. And I think that what you commit to as an organization is important externally, but what you do to move the needle internally is even more important, because there's no credibility there. There's money to be given at any point in time to any organization, but if your culture doesn't reflect what you're saying externally, then you lose your credibility. And I don't think that is something any organization wants to be known for. And I certainly didn't want it for IKEA. So taking a step back and looking at, our diversity efforts in earnest didn't come to fruition until about 2017. But from 2017 till present, what have we done? What are our actions? Let's keep a scorecard. But moving forward, not only will we continue to commit to what we've done externally, but I think internally the work is rolling up the sleeves. Now, globally, when you have an organization and you have a global parent, the concept of diversity is very different in Europe than it is here in the US. And so even watching their focus change to having a goal by 2024 that the representation of racial, ethnic, and national minorities in different IKEA countries will be reflected on every leadership level, that was a big commitment. And that's what we're working towards now. But that is substantive change internally that I think makes IKEA the place that it needs to be, and an example of what diversity really looks like from the inside and the outside.
Rudy, tell us about how Fidelity National has demonstrated a commitment that's both authentic and sustainable.
Well, we have about 20,000+ employees, and
Mhm.
so there's diversity at all levels. And oftentimes some of it is just by the nature of the market. You know, if we're going to have a Vietnamese market, we're going to have Vietnamese salespeople, Korean. In my world, which is the legal world, I do look for diversity in hires. And I'll tell you an interesting story. I find that people don't always know what diversity and inclusion mean. As I'm interviewing a law firm for a particular, it's a large matter, he's bragging about how many women partners they have in their office for a firm that size. I said, well, that's well and good, but how many Hispanics do you have? You realize you were talking to a Hispanic man, and his face turned red. So don't tout diversity unless you know what it means and unless you're prepared to act. Too often, people think diversity is a one-off thing. They think you hire a certain group, that's it. And then they think, we've got our quota and we don't need to do anything else. But as what you were alluding to, it is a constant effort on any company's part. Because if you let your guard down, if you stop, things will eventually go back to the way they were. And that's what I think none of us here on this panel, no one here in this room really wants to see. But until we define what it is, and the definition is consistent with everybody, you're going to have these hodgepodge programs that people say, we're diverse, and you're really not. And then, of course, there's a person, you all know, a major company that CEO tried to do diversity and he left. It's in Atlanta, correct? You all know who I'm talking about. Sometimes people are ostracized who try to implement diversity programs because people will say, yes, but when it comes time to implement the programs, they don't.
Absolutely. And I think it's easy in situations, as you pointed out, to see when a commitment is not authentic. So Gail, same question for you. How's Exelon faring?
Yeah, so, I can say for Exelon, diversity, equity, and inclusion has been a value for Exelon well before last May. It has been a focus of the company for as long as I can think of in terms of my experience with the company and my knowledge of the company. Everything that the company did leading up to May of last year was with a focus on how to build diversity, equity, and inclusion within the company, whether it's hiring panels, affinity groups, just all kinds of measures, workforce development and the like. But what happened with the events in May, obviously it was such a huge and important time in the country for us to rethink and reevaluate these issues. And what we did at Exelon was we started looking at the programs that we did have, which we thought and believed were very good. And we said, how can we make them better? So we undertook an effort to evaluate each of our programs, every dollar that we were spending, how we were spending it, to determine if we were using them most effectively. So let me give you an example of some of the things that we looked at. We took a look at things like not just how we were spending our dollars, which organizations we were giving to, but we started drilling down into things like reliability. So we have utility companies, PECO is an Exelon company, and we started looking at our reliability and is our reliability sort of equal across the board? Are we making sure that we have equitable, that we're equitably fulfilling our work in that regard across the board? We took a look at our workforce development programs. Were there things that we could do? Were there places that we could put workforce development in certain neighborhoods that could improve things in those neighborhoods? We put in place training centers where we encouraged individuals in underserved communities to enter into construction. We trained them in construction. We hired some of them, and if we didn't hire them, we helped place them in other companies that we worked with. So we really took the opportunity to say, okay, we feel good about where we are. We looked at in terms of our numbers, our diversity metrics, we felt good about that. But clearly there was a sea change that happened last May, and we wanted to be even better. And so it really took us drilling down into each of the areas, even areas that you wouldn't typically think of, like how is our reliability doing across the board, to make sure that we were doing all we could to move things forward in every community that we serve.
So we've talked about making authentic commitments, and we know that leadership of an organization has to be on board. It has to be from the top down. But how can legal departments inside of a company be drivers of diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout the entire organization? And I'll start with Rudy for that question.
It's interesting. A lot of my work is overseas. I do have a fair amount of litigation in the US. Overseas, I do look for diversity, believe it or not, because what you find for example, in the Czech Republic, where I've had major litigation, there are lawyers from Slovenia working in the same firm. And so I look to see how many women and men are there. Do they have people from other ethnic groups that are there? How integral are these groups in the entity? And when I look at a firm, I always look to see how the diversity makeup is, but all in all, I need the expert that's there. And then I'll go back to the firm and I'll say, why don't you have these types of experts, that fall within this category? There's sometimes where I need bilingual people in the US. Do you have anyone's bilingual? Easily, I referred somebody to a law firm in Chicago, and you'd probably know the firm. I said, this person speaks no English. They couldn't find anybody who could speak Spanish to service the client. So I look at it from a servicing point of view. It's, I have to make sure I find the firm that services my situation the best, because it's generally high dollar. But I do look to see the diversity in it. And what I personally will try to do is, if I've got like an African-American who's working on one of my cases, I had a outstanding lawyer in Indianapolis, I try to groom them and say, this is my mindset. This is, if you want to be successful representing clients like my company, this is, I think, the mindset you need to do. So I will go out of my way to mentor them, in a sense, to say, give them what I don't know if they're getting in their firm.
Absolutely. Stevie, how can an in-house legal department influence or drive diversity throughout the organization?
Well, I can speak on behalf of IKEA. I think it's twofold. For me, it was looking at internally, we're a service function, right? We're not a revenue generating function, but we can help impact the bottom line when we know that there are certain stores or distribution centers in the US where we see EEOC claims, repetitive, we see issues that deal with discrimination cases, and they spike in some areas. And so you can park that, but there's a larger problem. And so as a legal team, we can get together and we can drill down and we can figure out, is it a management problem? Is it a cultural problem? Is it a values? There's something more to this, or we wouldn't see, these repetitive claims. And so we've taken the approach of looking and peeling back those layers. And if it is training, if it is a focused attention on whatever's going on in that unit, we will be the first responders as legal. So that's internally. But I think also as a department, and it was mentioned earlier here about, the general counsel that attempted to mandate certain requirements from the law firms that service the organization. And we've done the same thing, and being a private company, we have more latitude to make sure that as a client, we have certain expectations. And we pay a lot of money to some of these firms that do work for us. And so in return, how can we influence what's going on at that firm? Because when you look at the statistics on who comes in as an associate, and it's fairly even between men, women, and the representation from underrepresented groups, is a decent proportionate size. But then as the career progresses and you get to a partnership or an equity partner level, the disparity is just, it's very disappointing. And so we've decided that we're going to put our dollars with firms that are committed to making sure underrepresented attorneys get client-facing time. They get work on our cases. We want to see what does your succession plan look like as a relationship manager. We've met with every single relationship manager that did work for a firm that did work for IKEA. And some firms were a little bit reluctant, but for me, the choice is binary. You either want to do work for IKEA, you don't want to do work for IKEA, because we want to make sure, and we will pay money to bring a young lawyer, Black, Asian, Latino, up to speed on our cases for their development. We will make sure that, that's part of our billing guidelines. And so as legal, that's the step that we took. And my goal is to influence the other functions internally to start to look at their supply chain as well.
Yeah, I think that's a big step for a company to take, right? To have the mindset of, we're going to help invest in the associates of the law firms that do work for us.
Can I add something to
Sure.
that? Because what you said is very interesting. I will have the associate like you at the meeting, and oftentimes that associate's not allowed to speak. And I will purposely say, what do you think? Then the partner begins to talk. I said, I'm interested in what the associate has to say. And that's a message that you send to sit down and let your associate talk. Because the only way you're going to give the associate credibility is if the client says, I really want to know what you think.
Mhm. Gail, tell us about how your legal department is driving diversity at Exelon.
So I think that we focus internally and externally. So we, in our legal department, we focus on our own diversity metrics. We make sure that we have diverse slates of candidates, that we have diverse panels who are interviewing them. And I present those metrics to our board of directors. I present them to our CEO, and the other departments within our company do that as well. So we collectively create an expectation that this is going to be an area that we will all work together to push forward for our company. And that is an expectation that we all have. When it comes to outside counsel, I think, similarly to what Stevie and Rudy have said, diversity is a very significant focus for us when we're looking at hiring outside counsel. It is a factor that we consider, and it is something that we don't go through a pitch or an RFP process or really any matter without taking a look at the metrics of the law firm, as well as the team that they're proposing, that the firm is proposing. So at Exelon, with regard to firms, we have a number of core firms. All of our core firms, we require them to fill out the ABA diversity survey. So it's a lot of work for them. We do appreciate it because we do use the information, which is helpful to us to assess how well the firms are that we consider our core are doing. And we also created something called our diversity honor roll for those firms who are excelling in the issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so it's kind of a premier group of law firms that service our company. It's hard to make the honor roll, but it is something that we use to encourage our firms to strive for that, to be on that list. And then once we hire a law firm, I think this is exactly the point Rudy was making about the associates. One of the things that's really frustrating to me is that sometimes you'll have someone sort of included in a pitch because it's for the presentation to look diverse. But when you actually get the team can oftentimes not be diverse. That's not okay. It's not okay with us. And it's a way to quickly lose our business. When we look at the teams that we want to staff our matters, we make sure that those teams are diverse. We identify diverse lawyers at the firm on matters, and we invest in them ourselves. We look for opportunities, similar to what both of you have said. We look for opportunities to give them things to do to help grow them. And honestly, when diverse lawyers leave a firm, that individuals that we work with on our matters, that we consider kind of our lawyers as outside counsel, that we have helped to develop and value a trusted relationship with, we expect to be told about it, because we look at this as if we are investing with our partner law firms in this space. So it's an area where, again, we focus internally, but we do all we can to try to raise the bar for our outside counsel, because we do have the power of the purse, and that's one way we can use it.
Mm-hmm. And Gail, let's continue with, the external facing side of this. And I mean, at Exelon, you literally keep the lights on, right, in our
Yeah.
communities. And
Literally.
and I know presence in community is very important to your
Very.
organization.
Mhm.
So how has that commitment changed over the past 15 months? What are some of the things that, you're doing to invest in your communities?
So we have, our company is active in every jurisdiction that we serve. Let me just take a second to talk about kind of the non-legal, and then I'll talk about legal. So, our workforce development programs that I mentioned, those continue. So some of the work and the training that we're doing in that space, we've had to do remotely. But as things have opened up, we've been able to build back in that space. And so we, just because we have a pandemic, the need really doesn't go away. So we've worked with kind of our non-legal space to continue to be as involved as we can be in communities, even if that sometimes has not allowed us to be face-to-face. On a legal side, at Exelon, we really pride ourselves on our community engagement as a legal department, both in terms of community service hours as well as pro bono work. And it's been difficult. We have in every city that we serve, we have pro bono clinics for where we provide, thousands and thousands of hours of free legal services. A lot of times we brought people in before, and we had those clinics. For example, in the ground floor at Pico, we have a very large room where we would hold these massive legal clinics. Hundreds of people would come in. Our lawyers and other lawyers, our outside counsel, we'd bring in to help serve and make a huge difference for people. As we haven't been able to get together, we've had to come up with new and different ways to approach that. We have been holding throughout the pandemic pro bono legal clinics that we can do virtually. Some of them, for example, we work a lot with the homeless advocacy program. That's been more challenging because of the clientele to be able to continue when we can't be in person. But other areas we can. We do a tremendous amount of work with the Senior Law Center, doing wills and other documents for senior citizens that we've been able to do remotely. We do transgender name change clinics with the Transgender Legal Defense and Education Fund. That has been tremendously successful remotely. So we've really looked for opportunities to continue that engagement while being able to do it in a virtual environment. But I will say we are all looking forward to getting back together in person to do that.
Likewise. Stevie, tell us about community engagement at IKEA.
So at IKEA, we are a purpose-led company. We're very values-driven, similar to Exelon. And we have a very robust sustainability function. And the combination of our sustainability function and then our racial equality and equity group and other groups, the combination created an IKEA Foundation. And it was through the foundation, we used that as a vehicle to identify businesses that supported underrepresented groups or portions of society. We combine the sustainability efforts in clean water, which often affects areas of the country where underrepresented families and groups live, and that effort has just grown exponentially since the ED&I portion has raised. We've spent a lot of time and money in sustainability, and we're known for that. Imagine if that same equitable investment was made on the ED&I space, and that was combined in a way that could impact not only here in the U.S., but thinking globally. The refugees issue in Europe can be impacted in a way that we leave a footprint. And I do applaud our internal team and our leadership We change leadership every so often, and people from Europe come over and they sit on the highest level of management, but they embrace this philosophy and this aspect of what IKEA stands for, in that, again, we have this obligation, to make sure that we contribute to a community in a way that's not just consumerism. And we have our head of HR, one of our initiatives is affordable housing. And how can we not only impact our communities, but what about our coworkers that have to work 2-3 jobs because they can't afford the housing? We have stores in areas that are somewhat remote. We're not necessarily in urban areas where the transit is easy or accessible. So how do we not only impact our community, but do the same thing internally? And the ideas can be endless. If you have the leadership willing to make the investment and willing to make sure that the actions that underlie that investment are accomplished.
And Rudy, tell us what community engagement looks like for you.
When I started with the company in 2006, I actually started as a combination business role and legal. My job was to build our international operations. And to do that, I went to literally almost every office, every major commercial office that we had. And what I noticed even back 15 years ago, that the offices reflected somewhat the composition of the community. When I go to our San Antonio office, I go to the Austin office, the people there were what you would expect to see because it's reflective of the community. I've seen it in Los Angeles, Texas. I've seen it in Chicago, New York. So I think by the nature of our business, diversity comes in a sense by default, and we've been fortunate that we've had a lot of good people who've done very well, who, because they're reflective of the market, we've been able to bring them on and not have to say, oh, we have to look for these people, but they're there and they're coming. And that's what I think is a great thing. That's why when I say diversity is good for the bottom line, I don't mean to say that it's not the right thing to do. It's definitely the right thing to do. But when you want to motivate people and somebody says, well, why should we do this? We're doing all right, aren't we? And if you say to them, you'll make more money, they'll start listening, perhaps even more. Oh, really?
I do want to go back to, since you mentioned it, outside counsel and how you measure their commitments, with a special focus on how do you hold outside counsel accountable for their commitments? And, has that changed, let's say, over the past year, right? Have there things that, you've decided to do just over the course of the past year to hold your outside lawyers accountable? And I'll start with Stevie for that question.
So I came into role at the end of December 2020. And again, one of the first things that I did was hired a deputy general counsel who oversees our legal operation. We were behind as a legal department in IKEA. It was only recently did IKEA believe that legal actually played an important role in operations in the US. So, but part of that restructure was the software, legal tracker, where, there's a component in that software where we can track, which attorneys work on which matters. In our billing guidelines that we revised, from top to bottom, the penalty is embedded in what will happen if our expectations are not met when you signed off on our billing guidelines. And so, it remains to be seen because it's only been about 3 months since everything was up and running, and we will see what happens. But I am very clear, because one of the things that when I reflect on 28, almost 29 years of practicing, is I'm in a role now where I can make the decision and I'm not afraid to do it. And I'm not afraid to tell you that you haven't met my expectation. And just like Rudy said, why isn't that associate talking? That's who they're going to meet with me. And so I'm not shy about making it known. And it can be a carrot and a stick. Hopefully we don't have to use a stick, but if we do, We're gonna bop you over the head with it. With a smile.
I like that. Rudy, same question for you. Any new ways of accountability?
Well, we have so much in the way of litigation that's scattered all over the place. So I can only talk about what's in my world at this point because that's what I have direct control over. And what I've done is when there's a situation where somebody's going to leave the firm, because what happens with people who are ethnically diverse, they often get frustrated with where they're at. They don't see the promotion. You know, they've got this, you know, women called it the, you know, the glass ceiling. Well, you know, I call it the brown Hispanic ceiling. You're there, you're not going to go, and they move. In some cases, I've moved the business. And I made it very clear, if he goes, that case is going with him and or with her. And then all of a sudden they have a reevaluation. Well, wait a minute. You know, well, maybe they might make that
Right.
person a better offer, or he might want to stay. But I have no problems about moving a case if I've got a lawyer who is, and I actually had that happen in a case where my lawyer was African American. I mean, not only is he a great lawyer, but he was a computer programmer, which is what I needed. And when they're getting ready to leave, I said, you better think about it twice. He leaves because it's a large book of business is going to go on just one case. And that's the only way I've been able to really enforce it, is to show the firm, I am committed to this person. I want to see this person develop and grow. And then I think that gives that lawyer an opening with the partners that say, wait a minute, the client likes this person.
Absolutely. Gail, new ways of accountability for you.
Yeah, I think it's similar to what has already been said. I mean, we focus, we focus on our metrics in terms of the way that hours are billed. We do the diversity honor roll, which I've already mentioned. And I guess the only other thing I'll say on this is that when I mentioned that we invested in individuals, and I noted that, if someone that we had invested in, a diverse lawyer that we work with, that we want to work with, that we want to grow, that we want to partner with as outside counsel for our company, if that person leaves, then we go to the firm for an explanation. So we want to know if that person is somebody that we want as our lawyer, that we have worked to partner with them on. We want to know, why did the person go, and is there anything within the culture that they need to focus on, and how could they have been better at retaining that person? I think that, our outside counsel, in-house counsel relationship is one where I do feel like we are a team. We view each other as a team. We want to work together to do what's right for the company. But as part of that, thinking as a team, we need to know that those members of the team are going to be able to stick around and feel comfortable in that environment. And if not, we want to know why it hasn't happened.
Absolutely. So we could listen to you talk for hours. This has been really, really insightful. So to close it out, I just want to ask one more question. We have a lot of law firms in the audience who I'm sure have been hanging on to every word that you've said. But do you have one lasting piece of advice that you want to give to law firm leaders, or just the outside lawyers in general who are in the audience? And Rudy, I'll start with you.
You would have to start with me. The only advice I would give is spend the time to invest in people that are going to be assets for you. Too often law firms churn through associates because you're there to do work, but you get talented people, and especially you get talented people from diverse backgrounds. Really invest in them. I guarantee you it will be more profitable for you. That's the biggest advice. The other thing I would tell you is you cannot have any type of diversity or inclusion program unless you eliminate racial bias. Many people will say, well, I'm not a racist. And very few, well, not some, I don't know now, but people will say, no, I'm not racist at all. But when you are confronted with the situation, that's where it comes out, right? And so people may be that way and they don't even know it. For example, comments like, you people, somebody asking me once, hey, am I a citizen? Born in Puerto Rico, by the way. Obviously, they don't know history, or they looked at me as a foreigner. You have to get your head wrapped around that. You can't have one without the other. And that person has to feel comfortable in your firm. And he or she has to feel that they're not the token. They're not there just because, that you got to fill some quota. There was a law firm in New York that I interviewed, and I'm also half Dominican. It had a Dominican lawyer there just to impress me. Well, I fooled them. I hired her. I said, I want her working on my stuff. If you're going to present her to me, obviously you think she's talented. That's why I hired her. And actually, when she moved to another firm, the Prague case I had, I called her and I said, I want your firm in Prague to handle it. Okay, so that stuff, it works. And they did a great job. They won the case for me. But I had her supervising it.
Awesome. Gail, what about you? Your lasting
Mine?
piece of advice for law firms?
So I'll say one thing before I give the advice. The first thing I'll say is thank you to the law firms. This is a lot of work. This is an area that we all have to work hard in. And in my experience, the law firms that we work with are working really hard in this space. So thank you for everything that you're doing. In terms of the advice I would have, I would say, and it goes to the implicit bias issue, is evaluate your training programs. Because what I have observed is that sometimes feedback for junior lawyers is not handed out equally. And what happens if you don't do that and you don't apply your training equally, people can't grow. And what happens is you start to see people, young lawyers peeling off as you move up the chain. So I would say my advice is take a good hard look at your training programs, at people who are supervising other lawyers, and making sure that they're handing out that advice and that supervision and that guidance equally, so that, when lawyers start at law firms, they're baby lawyers, right? They don't really, they don't really know how to be lawyers. They grow up there and they need to be trained, and everyone deserves the ability to be trained equally. So I would say focus on that.
Absolutely. Stevie.
So I would say that if you are doing a pitch or you are an existing firm working with an organization, be authentic. And I think Rudy said it, when you put in your marketing materials or throw someone on the pitch just to appear diverse, but that's not really the culture that you live, that would be the number one reason where I would not do any more work with a firm. As part of our presentation of our internal department, we featured this article in the New York Times dated 2006 about how diversity in law firms is dismal and work needs to be done, and quoted statistics. In 2021, we're still in the same place. What moves the needle? And especially the big firms, that there is a certain level, there's a demarcation. Maybe it's at 5 years, maybe it's at 10 at some firms, where the statistics, you see the drop off, the retention just goes in the toilet. What are you doing about that? What is the answer? And if it's not robust enough and we don't see partners or equity partners of color or women, then clearly it's a problem. And you can make a pitch, or you can, put in your marketing materials, anything you want, but the answer is in the data when we look at the top. And so unless there's some change there, there's something wrong. So be authentic. And I agree with Gail, I agree with Rudy, don't just make gestures. And, we hold ourselves accountable for that too. So we need to see it on your end. But thank you. For the firms that are really doing this, I would echo Gail and say thank you.
And authenticity is one of the themes for tonight. So I've gone way over my allotted time, and
Well, can I
in part because I was so
can I just share
fascinated.
one story though, because this is something that
Absolutely.
happened to me. I'm in New York interviewing firms for an arbitration I was going to have in the Ukraine. And the lawyer walks in And what he says is, ándale, ándale, ándale. And I said, it's interesting, you know, I'm not Mexican. I didn't hire him. Don't ever make jokes, okay?
But thank you so much. And again, I know I've gone way over my time, and I hope the bar has me back for another event, but we'll see. But this has been awesome. Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you for all of the frank, good, authentic teaching that was done today. I mean, this is really important. It was important to me personally to have a program like this. I think it's really important for the mission of our bar association. So Marcel, Gail, Rudy, and Stevie, thank you for all that you did to bring this together for us today. Let's give them a round of applause. I hope that all of you can join us. We're going to have a light cocktail reception for hopefully an opportunity to say hello to one another. We haven't seen each other in person in a long time. And we look forward to seeing you outside in the lobby. Thanks.